Hello folks, just out here in the garage today to do a little bit of an update on the Amico TIG-225, mainly because I did receive the fitting that Amico sent me. In the review I talked about how the fitting on the back of the welder is incorrect. It doesn't work with the included hose or basically any other fitting I can get. So I kind of had to rig it up for the review, and it still leaked a little bit, and it's just not ideal. I emailed Amico. They did email me right back and say, hey, we'll send you out a new fitting. I got the fitting about 5 or 6 days later, and it is exactly the same as what's on the welder. And now that I have one just separate, I can show you the issue a little bit better. So if you look into the fitting, it is actually just threaded straight through. I don't know how well that's showing up. It does step down because it has smaller threads on the other side, which actually connect to the solenoid on the welder. But the threads that are designed for the gas hose, they're just straight threads straight through with no seat. And the way these gas hoses work is they have this threaded fitting and this tapered end, and this tapered end is supposed to seat into a matching seat in the fitting. But since I have it sitting here, I can thread it on and show you just exactly what's happening. With that threaded all the way on, these two pieces are tight together. This is just loose on here. So the hose doesn't actually get tight in the fitting. So the fitting has the correct 5/8 threads with 18 threads per inch, so it threads right onto the hose fitting no problem, but it doesn't have a seat in there. Now if you look in from the other side, you can see that there's no seat, it just flops around in there. So that's the issue with the fitting. The one they sent me is exactly the same. I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm just gonna get a new fitting to thread onto the back of the solenoid. I thought I'd just at least give them an opportunity to see what they would do. They did send me a new fitting, but it's no different. I also wanted to do some testing on the insulation for the stinger lead and the work clamp cable. And I wanted to check into it because it did seem like it softened up quite a bit even when it just got warm from running it at 220 amps. So I wanted to see what kind of temps this insulation could actually hold up to. Just because you have maybe parts that you're working on that get awful hot, and you might have some slag or some spatter if you're stick welding, something like that could fall on the cable. You really don't want this insulation to melt really easily. You could have exposed wires, you could have shorting out, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to check this insulation, and it does actually melt pretty easily. So what I did was I heated up the handle of a wrench. Not exactly a super fancy way to do it, but I did have a high-dollar Fluke infrared thermometer that I was checking the temperature of that handle with, and then I would press it to the cable at different temperatures and just see what it would do to the insulation. Now, even at about 150 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, it really softened up the insulation quite a bit. It just really made the insulation real soft and kind of gooey, but it didn't really melt it. However, at about 350 degrees, you can probably see it just melted straight into that cable. Between 350 and 400 degrees, and it was just going right through that insulation. So this insulation does just totally melt at a fairly low temperature. Now 350, 400 degrees might seem fairly high, but in a welding situation there's a lot of hot stuff around, and I would really like to see this insulation hold up to a lot higher temperatures. And just as a comparison, this is the stinger cable for another welder that I'm actually going to be doing just a real brief review and maybe a slight comparison to this one pretty soon. This cable is also about a 4 gauge. And you can probably tell from the writing on there, it's still an overseas made cable. But even with that wrench at over 400 degrees, at 420 or somewhere around that, it did not even touch this insulation. So I could just press that hot wrench against this cable, and it did not harm the insulation at all. So just a comparison to show that even other cables that come with not necessarily high-end welders still do have far better insulation than this that can hold up to a lot more heat. Now, as you can probably see, I also swapped out the torch on this welder. Not necessarily recommending you buy this and swap out the torch. I did it just because I already have it, and I wanted to try it out for some TIG welding with a torch that I prefer quite a lot. This is still a 26 size torch, and it's kind of rigged here. But even still, in this state, it is still far nicer to use than the torch that came with this welder. Now, this is a CK Worldwide, still a 26 size torch, so it's still 200 amp rated. I do prefer a smaller torch than this. But for this, I was just kind of messing around, just wanted something that was a little bit nicer to use than the included torch. So So what I did was I actually took the wire out of the sheath for that other torch and wired it into just this little micro switch that I had on hand anyways, just from other things. It's nothing to do with welding. And that works out far better for me. I can hold the torch a lot more like I prefer. And the switch is right here. It's very easy to depress, easy to hold in. You can really tell where that click point is, where it engages and disengages. So I didn't have any of that issue with the arc going out or any kind of question of how hard I was going to have to hold it. So this was far easier to use, much easier to control. It also has the Superflex cable with it, so the cable is just a lot more flexible. It's just overall way nicer torch to use. I like it a lot better with this on it. I mean, again, it doesn't necessarily make good sense price-wise for what you have to just basically buy the welder and then upgrade everything it comes with. But just note that this torch alone made all the difference with TIG welding with this machine. And with that torch on there, I wanted to go ahead and see what kind of control I could have and just really test the low end of the machine. So with the welder set as low as it would go with this torch on it, I went ahead and welded some razor blades together. And you can see it came out okay. Even turned all the way down, the one issue I do have is that it will nip the corners off pretty much no matter what you do. I only did a couple of them, but it's it's a little hot for starting out, so it kind of wants to nip the corners. You can see they're not real pointy anymore. But it did weld together okay, and it came out all right. So the arc starts are pretty hot. So you had to be kind of careful where you started so that you didn't basically blow a hole right at the start. But other than that, I was able to weld this out without too much trouble. And the kind of erratic arc starting, which I kind of initially had thought was better with a 1/16 tungsten, because when I first started setting up to weld the razor blade, it seemed like I was getting a lot more consistent arc starting. But then before long, it was 3 or 4 or 5 tries to get it to start an arc. So it really wasn't cured. But just with all the little issues, I still probably wouldn't recommend it. I would say that it's a lot better if you upgrade all the accessories, but I don't really think this welder's worth putting that money into. So my opinion hasn't changed overall. I still stand by everything in the review. I just kind of wanted to give an update of what I've done. I wouldn't have spent the money to upgrade this torch on this welder, but I already had this. Had the right connectors on it, and all I had to do was just kind of rig up this torch switch. So it was easy to do, just something to try, see what kind of results I could get out of it if I had a torch on it that wasn't uncomfortable for me to use. And just kind of wanted to let you know the result of this fitting that Amico sent me that still is not the correct one. So that's it, just a little update. So if you have any other questions about this machine, or if there's anything else you'd like me to try on it, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Take care.